Welcome back. I'm Dave, the owner of Marine Craft, and I am fortunate enough to be able to inspect many boats when I go survey for the certified programs that we do for resale, or just if somebody needs a survey for insurance or some other reason. So I see a lot of boats when it comes time for inspection. I'm also fortunate enough to see a lot of boats that come through the marina here when we do repairs or upgrades. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time and maybe start a series to where we go over some of the things that I find that are kind of out of the standards. One of those things, when we're talking about basic electrical systems, is wiring. So in your land-based house, you probably have something similar to single strand conductor wiring. So this is Romex, which is a generic kind of brand name. But inside of this is your AC wiring for your home. You have an outer insulation. You have two conductors that are insulated. This is your line and your neutral. And then you also have a ground, which kind of has a little brown paper wrapped around it, which you can strip down to bare copper. Now, this insulation is not rated for stuff that you might find, especially in a machinery space on your boat, like diesel, oil, different things like that. It also doesn't have the same type of heat resistance rating. For instance, most marine insulation is rated to about 105 degrees Celsius that we install on boats. So those are some things that you might want to consider if you ever are in a pinch and you have to, for some reason, do some non-standard marine wiring if you're out in the middle of nowhere. Another thing is, since this is single strand wire, you can see it's stiff, it's a little bit pliable, but it's a single strand wire. When you're on a boat and you're underway especially, or even at a marina, if somebody wakes you, your boat's going to vibrate. And this single strand wire is going to move a little bit. And then that constant moving is going to eventually crack or possibly even break this wire completely. Now, it's not like that's going to happen, within an hour of you installing this, but over months or years, that will definitely transpire. And then you'll be stuck with either an intermittent open, which would be hard to find to figure out where the problem is, or you'll have a completely open circuit. And then if it's open on the line or the neutral or something, you could have a short possibility there. So we want to make sure that we're not using Romex unless it's an absolute emergency and this is the only thing you have laying around. Another problem with residential wiring is the connections. So if you want to join multiple wires into one in a home, you may use something like this. This is a wire nut. It's basically an insulator wrapped around a threaded connector. So you would take two strands of your solid strand Romex, for example, drive them in here, and then you just simply screw this on. Now that works great if you're in your house, which isn't normally subjected to bashing through the waves and salt spray and any number of other things that you might experience out on the water. One of the problems with this is it's obviously not sealed. So if this thing is hanging upside down and it's near a wet area, all that condensation, salt, whatever is going to stay into here. Another thing is, since it is just a screw-on connector, like any nut on a stud, over time, through years of vibration maybe, this can possibly back out. Again, that'll manifest in an intermittent open, which will be hard to find, or it might completely separate, which leaves now your powered line and your neutral just kind of hanging out there in space, and we definitely don't want that because that could be a fire hazard. So in the marine industry, what we do is we use marine grade wire. Now, marine grade wire has multiple strands. We can kind of see that here, how this has many small strands. And these look silver because this is actually tinned wire. So they put a coating on the copper strands to help protect it from corrosion. So let's say if this isn't completely covered and you have a small little section there where the end of your terminal might be, it's always best to cover all the wire, but if you happen to accidentally leave it open, the tinned on the wire will help keep that much more protected for corrosion. So because it is many strands, it's a lot more pliable, a lot more flexible. It makes it easier to install, one, but then two, it's not going to break as easily under vibration. Again, you have an outer insulation, and these are rated normally to 105C. There are higher ratings and lesser ratings, but especially if you're running it through a hot space or a place that has diesel maybe or something like that, you want to make sure that you have the marine grade insulation. That way you don't have to worry about it melting, because like Some wire, for example, the insulation on it is not meant to hold petroleum products, for example, and you can actually melt the insulation by soaking it in diesel or something like that. And then now you just have bare wire running through there, and you don't want bare wire that's live running through your machinery spaces at all. So when you're doing electrical work, make sure you're always using green grade wire. It is more expensive, but in the long run, and possibly in the short run, it's much better for you. So in lieu of the wire nuts, which again, there's a standard in ABYC E1115 that tells you not to use those on a boat. If you want to extend a single conductor, for example, you would use a butt connector, much like this. This is the heat shrink version, and I like to use these even though they're not always required in every part of the boat. I like to use these almost all the time if possible. That way I don't mistakenly put a nylon connector someplace where a heat shrink one is required. So everything on the boat that we do here is going to be heat shrink terminals. So that's the way you want to do it if you want to extend a single wire. But let's say you want to add a bunch of wires. You could add a bunch of wires in your home with one of these. You just get the little bit larger wing nut, and then you can add a few more wires in here and screw them all together. But on a boat, we obviously don't want to do that, so we're going to use a ring terminal, much like this. Again, this is the heat shrink variety. And we will have our wire in here. We'll crimp it with heat shrink crimpers so we don't damage the heat shrink portion. And then we would connect that to some sort of bus work, much like this. So you can see here, this one's got a plastic insulated cover on it. That way, if something falls on it, it's not going to come in contact with it. So you always want to keep, especially your hot wires and terminals, covered in case there's an accidental grounding somehow. Like say if you're working somewhere else and you drop the wire on here, you don't want to cause a short. Now when you are using something like this, again, for an abundance of caution through the marine standards and ABYC, you can only stack 4 ring terminals on each stud. The largest one on the very bottom closest to the actual bus bar. That way it's got the best contact since that's the largest conductor. And then you would stack them to the smallest, much like you would a pyramid. And then again, only 4 per terminal. That's why sometimes you need really long bus bars with many studs. And then especially if it's hot, make sure that you have a insulated cover over top of it. Really, it's probably a good habit to get into to just put an insulated cover on every connection, whether it's line, positive, neutral, ground, any of that stuff. And that way you're just always the safe as you can be when you are working around it. If you want to read more about some of these standards, I have a couple of them cited on our blog post that correlates to this video. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out to us at Marine Craft. We're always happy to help our owners out find the best, safest way to enjoy their time on the water. If you want to look up the ABYC standards, you can check those out on ABYC Inc. And again, hope you guys have a good time out there, and we'll see you out on the water.